When my grandfather called me that day and said, "You need to come home right now. I need to tell you the truth about your sister," I had no idea that one phone call would change everything I thought I knew about my family. Until that moment, I thought I was just the struggling older brother, living in a small apartment I paid for, while my spoiled younger sister lived like a queen in the same place, eating my food, sleeping on my bed and acting like she owned the place. But after Grandpa's revelation, I realized she had been living a life built entirely on lies. I still ask myself, was I wrong for what I did afterward? Tell me if you would have done the same thing. It all started 2 years ago when I moved out of my parents' house. I was 25, working full-time at a logistics company, barely making enough to cover rent and groceries, but at least I had my independence. My younger sister, Zara, was 22, beautiful, spoiled, and used to getting her way. She had always been the princess of the family. My parents, especially my mom, treated her like she could do no wrong. If I came home late, I was scolded. If Zara stayed out till 3 a.m., it was "she's young, let her enjoy." That favoritism had always been a wound in my heart, but I kept it buried. I thought once I lived on my own, I could finally have peace. I was wrong. One morning, Zara called me crying. She said she'd had a huge fight with Mom and Dad, that they didn't understand her, and that she needed a place to stay for a few days. I hesitated, but she sounded desperate. I told her she could stay in my apartment, but only for a week. Just 1 week, she agreed immediately. I didn't know that week would turn into a nightmare that lasted almost an entire year. From the very first day she moved in, Zara treated my apartment like it was her own personal palace. She brought her massive luggage, her expensive makeup kits, and piles of clothes. She took the master bedroom, my bedroom, without even asking. I came home from work that evening to find her lying on my bed, eating chips, watching Netflix on my TV, and leaving crumbs everywhere. I told her politely, "Zara, I need that room. It's my apartment." She just laughed and said, "Come on, you're barely home anyway. You work all day. I'll keep it clean." Spoiler, she didn't. Every day after that, she ordered food online using my credit card. She invited her friends over constantly. They'd stay up all night, blasting music, doing TikToks in my living room, and drinking. My neighbors complained several times, but she didn't care. When I tried to talk to her, she'd roll her eyes and say, "Relax, bro, you're so uptight. I'm just living a little." I started avoiding my own apartment just to stay sane. I'd spend extra hours at work or sit in my car at night, wondering how I ended up feeling like a guest in my own home. A few months later, things got worse. I discovered she hadn't just been using my credit card, she had actually linked it to her online shopping apps. When I checked my bank statement, there were hundreds of dollars in transactions for clothes, perfume, and even a spa membership. I confronted her, furious. "Zara, are you serious? You're stealing from me." She just shrugged and said, "I'll pay you back when I get my modeling job." The problem was, she didn't have one. She wasn't even trying. Every morning, she slept until noon and spent the rest of the day taking selfies or scrolling through Instagram. At one point, I couldn't even pay rent on time because of her spending. My landlord called, threatening eviction. I begged Zara to move out, but she cried, saying she had nowhere to go, that our parents were too strict, and that she'd behave better. I gave her one last chance, and like a fool, I believed her. Then, one night, I came home and found her throwing a party. My apartment was full of strangers, loud music, cigarette smoke, and empty bottles. I completely lost it. I screamed at her in front of everyone, telling them all to get out. She started crying again, saying I embarrassed her in front of her friends. I didn't care any more. The next morning I told her to leave, but she looked me dead in the eyes and said something that shook me. "You can't kick me out of my own apartment." I was stunned. "Your apartment? What the hell are you talking about?" She smirked and said, "Didn't Grandpa tell you? He bought this apartment for me, not you." I thought she was bluffing. I laughed in disbelief. Yeah, right. I've been paying rent and bills for this place for a year." She crossed her arms and said, "You think you're paying rent. That money goes into Grandpa's account. He told me he gave you this apartment because of me. You're basically my tenant." I didn't know whether to laugh or punch a wall. I called Grandpa immediately, but he didn't answer. For days I couldn't sleep. The thought kept haunting me, what if she was telling the truth? Had Grandpa lied to me all along? I had worked extra shifts, skipped meals, and sacrificed so much to live independently, and now my sister was saying it was all a setup. A week later, Grandpa called me and asked me to visit him. His tone was serious, almost heavy. I went to his house that Sunday, still boiling with questions. The moment I walked in, he looked at me and sighed. "I know why you're here," he said. "It's time you knew the truth." My heart pounded. He led me to his study and closed the door. "Zara's been living with you, hasn't she?" I nodded. "She told you the apartment was hers." I nodded again. He looked disappointed, almost sad. Then he said words that would flip everything upside down. "The apartment was never yours or hers. It's mine, and I let you live there to test you both." I was speechless. Test us. He explained that a year ago he wanted to see which one of us was responsible and trustworthy enough to inherit a major part of his estate. He told both of us separately that he was giving us the apartment, but he didn't tell either of us about the other. He wanted to see how we'd handle the situation if we thought it was ours. My jaw dropped. He continued, "You worked hard, paid your bills, and kept your job. She failed miserably." I was stunned. My sister had turned the whole test into a circus, and I was the one who suffered for it. But Grandpa wasn't done. He leaned closer and said, "What she doesn't know is that I've already made my decision. She won't inherit a cent. You, on the other hand, have proven that you're capable, but I needed to see how you'd react to being mistreated before giving you what's rightfully yours." I sat there in silence. My emotions were a mix of anger, relief, and confusion. I asked him why he hadn't stepped in sooner, why he let me go through months of misery. He smiled sadly. "Because sometimes true character is only revealed under pressure. I needed to see how far she'd go, and how patient you could be." Then he handed me an envelope. Inside was a document that said I was now the legal owner of not just the apartment, but 2 more rental properties he owned. I was speechless. "You earned it," he said. "Now, it's up to you how you handle your sister." So that was the situation I was in. My sister thought she owned my apartment, and my grandfather had just handed me proof that it was all mine. Before I tell you what I did next, pause for a moment and tell me, what would you have done in my place? Would you have kicked her out immediately, or taught her a lesson first? I really want to know what you'd have done if your own sibling had treated you like that. Anyway, back to what happened next. I drove straight home, my hands shaking the entire way. I didn't tell Zara anything right away. I walked into the apartment like usual, pretending nothing had changed. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, surrounded by shopping bags. When she saw me, she smirked and said, "You still mad about the rent thing? You'll get over it." I smiled maybe for the first time in months and said calmly, "Yeah, you're right. I already did." The next morning, I went to the landlord's office with the ownership papers. I officially transferred all utilities, keys, and documents under my name. That evening, I came home with a folded copy of the papers and placed them on the coffee table. Zara was painting her nails. I said, "Hey, can you look at this for a second?" She looked annoyed but glanced at it. The moment she saw my name on the ownership deed, her face drained of color. "What is this?" she whispered. I leaned forward and said quietly, "This is me kicking you out of my apartment." She exploded. She accused me of lying, forged documents, manipulation, everything. But when I told her Grandpa had called me and told me the truth, she broke down crying. "He promised me this place," she sobbed. "I told her, he promised us both something, Zara, but only one of us earned it." She tried to guilt-trip me, saying she had nowhere to go, that she'd changed, that she was sorry, but I'd heard it all before. I gave her 48 hours to pack and leave. For 2 days she begged, cried, and even tried to call Grandpa, but he didn't answer. On the third day I came home to find her gone. The apartment was quiet, eerily quiet. For the first time in almost a year I could hear my own thoughts. But something strange happened afterward. I didn't feel as happy as I thought I would. I felt empty. Despite everything she had done, she was still my sister. I started questioning if I'd been too harsh. Then, a week later, Grandpa called again. "You did what you had to," he said. "Don't feel guilty. Sometimes tough love is the only kind that works." He was right. A few months later, Zara started working. She found a small apartment and began earning her own money. She even called me one night to apologize. I didn't realize how selfish I'd become. She said through tears, "I thought everyone owed me something, but you were the only one who actually cared enough to let me fail." We talked for hours that night. It felt like we were finally rebuilding our bond, but this time on honest ground. Now, every time I walk through my apartment, I remember those dark months, the frustration, the betrayal, and the unexpected test that came from my own family. I realized that sometimes the people you love the most can hurt you the worst, but forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means growing beyond the pain. My relationship with Zara isn't perfect, but it's real now. She visits sometimes, but she never overstays. She brings her own food, pays for dinner, and even cleans up after herself. That's growth, I guess. Looking back, I think Grandpa knew exactly what he was doing. He wasn't just testing us, he was teaching us. He showed us that entitlement destroys character, while responsibility builds it. And maybe, just maybe, that's what family is supposed to be. A painful, messy, but ultimately meaningful lesson in how to love and forgive. So, that's my story. My sister lived like a queen in my apartment, until Grandpa revealed the truth that changed everything. Tell me, was I too harsh on her, or did she get what she deserved? Like this video if you were on my side, and don't forget to subscribe for more real life stories that will leave you speechless. And if you've ever had a sibling who pushed you to your limits, drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you all in the next story.